Mr. Crow, what can we do to Mr. Crow, what can we do to increase the development of domestic production of energy sources?
Well, natural gas is selling for about $2 an MCF, 1,000 cubic feet. It's the lowest it's been in about 10 years. If North Carolina had gas wells offshore, I'd be jumping up and down to get them to close them and shut them off. That's not the problem. Actually, Dick Cheney, I think, in this task force did a really good job. We're up to almost 10 million barrels a day. It's supposed to go 3 million more barrels a day. And then when you get Canada's giving us 3.5 million barrels a day, Mexico's 1.2, we're using 1.8. We're so close to independence right here, it's unbelievable. The problem is price fixing. And also with all this genius to increase the production, they also figured out a way to get the price up. And I think that's, going into Libya and here, there, and yonder and taking oil off the market. But really, I would not do anything to do. I was talking to a geologist friend of mine. He's crying because natural gas prices are so low. Oil would be $12.50 a barrel if it was selling on the free market like natural gas is right now. So they're trying to run the small gas producers out of business in Texas right now. But the price fixing is with oil, and oil could be a lot less if we would quit invading countries and taking their oil off the market. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we're going to start Mr. Pantano. I'm going to ask you to respond first to this question, sir. What are your plans to reform programs such as Social Security and Medicare for the younger generation while still protecting the older generation?
That's such an important question, and the way you phrased it is important. Everybody has heard this expression of the meta-scare tactics of the Democrats. In fact, we had Ronald Reagan do robocalls for us back in the 2010 election. You all remember the $2.5 million of attack ads that Mike McIntyre and Nancy Pelosi ran for him, claiming that I was going to end Social Security and Medicare as you know it. Friends, that tactic has been used against Republicans across the country for more than 30 years. And it's a lie. It's a blatant falsehood because the Democrats don't actually have any real solution to save this entitlement system that we know is broken. Do you know that by 2045, every single dollar that the government collects in tax revenue will go to pay for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid? That's not a forest ranger. That's not an FBI agent or a Marine. That's all to feed this entitlement structure. Well, there has been a plan out there for some time. Some folks like Newt Gingrich even called it right-wing social engineering. But I have stood with Congressman Paul Ryan. I supported the plan in 2010, and he supported me. He supported our campaign this time around as well. And I stand with that plan. It's a very specific plan, and it says we need to be honest. We need to have those conversations with the third rail of politics. We need to talk about Social Security and the fact that if you are 55 and younger, will you raise your hand? 55 and younger, I'm going to put some of you on the spot. Friends, we are going to have to raise the retirement age for you. And I guarantee you that most of the really young folks here don't even believe that these benefits will be there for them anyway. That's the trust gap that's created. That's our duty to solve. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Crow, what are your plans to reform programs such as Social Security and Medicare for the younger generation while still protecting the older generation?
Well, I have a major problem with calling Social Security an entitlement or a tax. I feel like it's a contribution. Congress just cut Social Security contributions by 2% last year. This has taken $240 billion away from Social Security, which would be going towards the claims. If Social Security does not get the 2%, it is going to become insolvent along with the seniors that go along with it. So the first thing I would do is every chance I got, I would vote to bring these contributions back into the game. And I think that we're making a massive mistake to say anything different than that. This stock market is so totally and completely corrupt. They can run it up and down in a second. So anybody that's planning to take their money and go play the stock market, might as well be sending it to the banksters. They're going to end up with it. So I think it's important to have it. And actually, What I have read is that Social Security is solvent if you get the money, but when you start taking out $240 billion a year, that guarantees Social Security is insolvent, and there's method in the madness, and why they're allowing it to happen is who knows what, but I don't think that this government, or beyond the government, really cares too much about the people. Thank you.
Mr. Crow, thank you. Senator, your plans to reform programs such as Social Security and Medicare for the younger generation while still protecting the older generation?
Well, that's a very important question, and in every debate, I think it's very important to outline what the problems are. I think one of the problems that we as Republicans have had in addressing this issue is the fact that the rest of the public, many in the public, don't understand that these two programs are unsustainable the way they're currently crafted. We have to sell the case, number one, that Social Security will not be around in the future if we don't reform it, and that Medicare will not be available either. Once we make that case, and once the American people understand that these programs have to be reformed, I think then it's very important, and I commend Paul Ryan and others who are working so diligently on this, then it's very important to lay out what the options are and have that conversation with the American people so that we can build consensus and move forward. That's the way you defeat the Democrat machine that demagogues the issue that prevents us from getting these major reforms achieved. Personally, we need to have options for our younger folks in terms of Social Security and their retirement, and also in terms of structuring Medicare so it's solvent for the future. These are two very important programs for the future of this country and for the future of the citizenry. If we're going to preserve them and protect them, number one, we got to make the case that they're unsustainable, and they are. And then we've got to lay out the various options and have that dialogue with the American people to figure out how we want to proceed forward to preserve them and protect them in the future.
On the subject of tax reform, and we'll start with you, Mr. Crow. Tax reform has been a popular topic for candidates in the last several election cycles and here tonight. However, very little has been done in Congress to actually pass a comprehensive tax reform bill. Do you believe it's possible to fundamentally reform the tax code? And if so, how would you do so?
Well, I mean, there's so many people that buy congressmen to give them their little, deduction or this thing or the other to get what they want. It's probably going to be extremely difficult to get rid of it. I'm not a real big fan of taxes. I think that everybody has said if the corporate income tax rate isn't reduced from 35% down to some amount, I think 15% would be a good. We're totally uncompetitive, and our corporations are going outside of the United States because of that. These things about flat taxes and things like that, I don't know that I understand them too well, but I think 15% is a generous plenty, and I think that would be, after you subtract your deductions and things like that, I think paying 15% maybe ought to be all right, and then maybe if you made, I don't know, a couple $1 million, you could increase it by maybe 10%. But I don't like, things that are too dramatic, but I think that I would work for something like that. It's just, a 15% tax rate. I think that would be good.
Thank you, Mr. Crow. Senator Rouser, do you believe it's possible to fundamentally reform a tax code? And if so, how would you do it?
Well, first let me say I like the dramatic. I like the idea of shutting down the IRS and starting over. I think that's what we need to do. If we're going to turn this country around, we got to have a little drama. And we got to have a conversation with the American people, and we've got to have a little excitement in this debate. So I'm all for the drama. How you do it with a team effort going into an election in November. We've got to have a president that's strong, that articulates the conservative message, and we got to have a team of House members and Senate candidates that are singing from that same song sheet. Then guess what? When you get elected, you have an agenda. You have the force of the people behind you to enact the change that needs to take place in order to turn this country around. It all starts with a message. and communicating that message to the American people. Personally, I'm for a flat tax. I think let's get rid of the IRS. I think it's awfully challenging to get rid of the 16th Amendment. I think politically, it's going to be much easier to put in place a flat tax that's low, fair, and simple, and one rate. And quite honestly, I don't think the government should charge any more than the Lord requires. 10%.
Thank you. Mr. Pantana, one, do you believe it's possible to fundamentally reform the code? And if so, how would you do so?
I do, and I think that, you know, as you hear more and more non-answers tonight, I want you to be attuned to the fact that it is a very difficult proposition that our future lawmakers are going to have to undertake. All of the easy choices have been made. All of the easy, hassle-free deals have been done. And what is going to be left is going to require knowledge and courage. And I'm going to offer to you, reforming the tax code is going to be a very difficult, demagogue undertaking. Personally, I support the fair tax, and I think that that's the quickest way to jumpstart our economy and to simplify the tax code. But recognizing the fact that the Paul Ryan budget is the Republican solution to our economic woes right now, and I've supported that. And again, I'm giving you something concrete to hold on to. The Ryan budget was supported by the Republicans this last session. The Democrats did not support it. Mike McIntyre did not support it. It was presented in the session prior. Again, the Republicans voted for it, never got the light of day in the Senate. We have had budget proposals. We have been working to try and simplify the tax code. Closing the loopholes all lives in this budget proposal. I would encourage you again, there's not enough time in a 30-second soundbite, but you've got a website, pantanoforcongress.com. Read the Ryan Path to Prosperity for yourself. It's 100 pages. Do the work, and then tell your friends about it, and then write letters to the editor about it. Because instead of letting this issue be demagogue, you have to have some experience with it. Thank you.
Mr. Senator Rouser, we're going to ask you to respond first to the next question, sir. Illegal immigration is a complicated, multifaceted problem for states and the federal government. What are your plans to reform U.S. immigration for states and the federal government? What are your plans to reform U.S. immigration law and policy?
Thank you for the question. It is a very complicated subject that is often demagogued, and demagogued for political gain. Here's how you solve the immigration problem. And before I lay that out, I think it's instructive to understand how we got the problem to begin with. You know, we're a large agricultural country, even now. And in the early part of the country, almost all the country was agrarian. In the 1940s, farmers found they needed labor. They worked out an agreement, the U.S. government worked out an agreement with Mexico to institute what they called the Bracero program. That Bracero program enabled Hispanics to come across the border and come and work in the United States. And when they got done with their work, they went home. Well, in the 60s, a fellow by the name of Ted Kennedy and other liberals got together and they decided that program wasn't very good. The reason why was they were concerned about worker exploitation, but rather than addressing the issue of worker exploitation, what did they do? They eliminated the program. Eliminated the program and had no border enforcement. So guess what? The farmers still needed labor. The folks that wanted to come here still wanted to work and go back home, and they did. When folks started to get concerned about border enforcement or about securing the border, rather than going back to Mexico, they decided to stay. Right? So they wouldn't risk, not being able to get back across. Here's what you do to fix it. You secure the border, you put in place good guest worker programs that actually work, that employers can use. And then the third thing, if you want to transition and get rid of the underground, the only way to do it is to enable those who are working, who are paying taxes, who are otherwise contributing to society, let them come forward, earn their way. Then you will know who we need to deport and get rid of, and we will drain the swamp.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pantano, illegal immigration is a complicated, multifaceted problem for the states and the federal government. What are your plans to reform U.S. immigration law and policy?
All of the problems that we face today are complicated and multifaceted. You can't name for me one that isn't. Having said that, immigration here in North Carolina alone, immigration is a $2.3 billion problem. It's a tax that is paid by your children and mine in school. It's paid in the courtroom. It's paid in the emergency room. As a deputy, I know firsthand when we had to have the television on the Spanish language channel because there were so many inmates that did not speak English. Those are your tax dollars at work, friends. So how do we solve that? Securing the border is number one. Number two, we need to make sure that we remove an incentive that's the magnet. Sanctuary cities, for example, that receive federal funds, that has to stop immediately. Having a workable program for those in the agriculture community, there is such a program today. It's called the H-2A program. I've done my research and spoken to groups like the North Carolina Growers Association, and they have workable solutions. When agriculture demands on-the-spot seasonal labor, there are solutions in place. But friends, let me tell you something. 14% of the illegals in America are involved in agriculture. 86% are doing something else. Now, who is the fastest growing unemployed population in the United States? Can anyone guess? It's veterans. It's veterans 18 to 30. Right now they're at an unemployment rate of about 30%. If this president's budget is allowed to go through, which cuts $500 billion out of our defense, that unemployment rate could go up to 50%. Now let me leave you with one last statistic. The only group in construction to gain employment in the year 2009 was illegals. They gained 100,000 construction jobs. Thank you.
Mr. Crow, illegal immigration is a complicated, multifaceted problem for the states and for the federal government. What are your plans, sir, to reform U.S. immigration law and policy?
Well, they are 11 million illegal immigrants are here. It's a massive problem. Visas are also a massive problem that are taking jobs. Like 200,000 workers are losing their jobs to people that are coming here with visas. 850,000 are working on visas right now, taking away American jobs. 6 million over the last 10 million have lost that. You know, I hate to talk conspiracy theory, but you know, there are some people that talk about this North American Union and borderless stuff. There's something involved in this illegal immigration because they have fake Social Security numbers. Now, if I were to drive between here and Kelly without my safety belt, I'm sure I'd be picked up about 16 times and given a ticket. So how in the heck can you have 11 million people here without Social Security numbers and, oh, that's okay, you know, we're not going to get you. So that's the first thing. Arizona has got a tough law against them, and you know, if somebody gets stopped, show me your birth certificate. And I don't want an Obama birth certificate. I want a birth certificate and prove that you're here. And if you can't prove that you know that you're here and have a birth certificate, then you're out of here. Thank you.
On the subject of the future of America, many countries, such as Greece and France, have reached a point where their entitlement programs have helped to bankrupt their countries. How would you stop the United States from following that trajectory, that path?
Who gets the question?
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Pantano.
Everyone's heard of the pigs. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, Spain, Italy now, France may be joining them. The euro is one of the reasons that our stock market has gone over 13,000 because money is fleeing Europe for good reason. We've seen the riots in Athens. We understand what's at stake. In fact, we've even seen Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Wilmington. We know how the left is trying to create a class warfare dialogue when the truth is it's an entitlement warfare dialogue. We have an entire society of people that work for a living competing with a society of people that vote for a living. That has to change. And that's everything from how we handle unemployment insurance and what we do to get people back on their feet by giving them a hand up instead of a hand out, all the way to how we handle the cost curve, which is bankrupting our country. And that is, again, where I come back to the very specifics of the Paul Ryan budget. Oh, Ilaria, you keep mentioning that. Why? Because, friends, while it is specific, when you stand for something, often you're attacked. I'm the only one that's taken a position on that program publicly and earnestly, and since this campaign has been underway. And the reason why is because you're subject to attack when you stand for something. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is already putting out press releases because I support the Ryan budget. Some of you may even have seen that Democrat super PACs are in our area running commercials for McIntyre because I support the Ryan budget. Thank you.